Our Heavenly Father, again, we are so grateful that you are always with us. You always watch over us, and you sent your Son to assure this. Please bless this cup, for it is his blood that was shed. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Okay, we're going to start out with our little video here.
Do I touch it?
Yeah, go ahead. What is it?
All right. What's your favorite food ever? This is tough. Salad, mac and cheese, pancakes, and popcorn.
My dad's steak.
Pizza. So good.
What food do you dislike most? I hate cheese.
Vegetables. Spinach.
Tomatoes.
What's a face you make when you eat raw tomato?
I don't eat it at all.
What do you do when someone gives you food you don't like? Play with it until it got cold. I'll say, hey, what's that? They look that way.
Right, because if it was gross, then why would I want to eat it?
Did you know that 1 out of every 5 kids doesn't have enough food to eat? 1 out of 5. 1 out of every 5 kids.
Can you turn the bag around and look at the other side?
Oh. I didn't know it was in America.
I don't know what to say to that. Makes me feel bad. Makes me want to cry.
Wow.
That's a lot of kids.
It's kind of unfair because some people have too much stuff and some people have too little.
For me, I always get to eat lunch. And if that's a meal that I'm missing, I will feel very disappointed.
It makes me feel like, what are we going to do to fix this?
What is something we can do to help fight hunger together?
So over there we have a wall with tons of ideas, and we want to add your idea to the wall.
Kid could think, oh, that's not possible, or oh, I'm too young to do this. But it is possible, and you're not too young to do it.
Donate money as much as I can.
Make Thanksgiving every day.
We should all get a group and try to find the foods that would be easiest to give.
And we can take the food to homes where they don't have food.
That's a small way to have a big effect.
Post videos about children not being able to eat.
Everyone brings canned food, and they build a big fort. And then they donate all the canned food.
And then they could have everything for free.
If there was some machine that could make food, my machine would change it to 0 out of 5 kids being hungry. The tiniest ripples make the biggest waves. If all the kids in the world got together and did something big, they could impact the whole world.
So if you weren't here last Sunday, we began a series of lessons from the Gospel of Luke, which may only take us through 32 verses of chapter 6, beginning in verse 17. So it's not even the whole chapter, but it's a long chapter. And we may add to that, but this is what is sometimes called the Sermon on the Plain, and that's where I get that title, The Plain Truth. But the Sermon on the Mount is the one that we're more familiar with probably than is found in Matthew 5, but they're not two different accounts of one sermon as we talked about last week, but they're two different sermons given in two different places. In Matthew, Jesus went up on a mountain in the eastern part of the Israelite region with Jewish listeners and some Gentile listeners from the Decapolis, the area of the 10 cities east of the Sea of Galilee. But in Luke, Jesus went down on a level place, on a plain, and spoke to Jewish listeners as well as Gentiles, but these were Gentiles from Tyre and Sidon, which were cities on the west coast, the Mediterranean Sea. So I believe that Luke chose to use this particular material from Jesus' teachings because it related a little bit better to his Gentile reader, Theophilus, who was a high-ranking Roman official. And as Gentiles, which we all are, we should also pay attention to some of the differences between the Sermon on the Mount and the Sermon on the Plain, to ask whether there are some things in our hearts and in our experience in the world that we need to pay special attention to in these words of Jesus, just like we do need to pay special attention to the words in the Sermon on the Mount. So let's read the lead-in and the beginning of the Sermon on the Plain again. Instead of just blessings, like we have in the Beatitudes in Matthew 5, that's the meaning of the word beatitude. We have both blessings, we have Beatitudes, but we have corresponding woes in Luke. So let's read. He went down with them and stood on a level place. A large crowd of his disciples was there, and a great number of people from all over Judea, from Jerusalem, and from the coastal region around Tyre and Sidon, who had come to hear him and to be healed of their diseases. Those troubled by impure spirits were cured, and the people all tried to touch him, because power was coming from him and healing them all. Looking at his disciples, he said, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who hunger now, for you will be satisfied. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh. Blessed are you when people hate you, when they exclude you and insult you and reject your name as evil because of the Son of Man. Rejoice in that day and leap for joy, because great is your reward in heaven, for that is how their ancestors treated the prophets. But woe to you who are rich, for you have already received your comfort. Woe to you who are well fed now, for you will go hungry. Woe to you who laugh now, for you will mourn and weep. Woe to you when everyone speaks well of you, for that is how their ancestors treated the false prophets." So, last Sunday we asked the question, what is good about being poor? And what is so bad about being rich? And we're going to ask the same questions as we work our way down the list of blessings and woes, beginning with this one today. Blessed are you who hunger now, for you will be satisfied. And woe to you who are well fed now, for you will go hungry. So the question is, what is good about being hungry? Well, according to the organization called Feeding America, these are the facts about hunger in America. More than 34 million people, including 9 million children, are what they call food insecure. The pandemic has increased food insecurity. Rural communities are especially hard hit by hunger, and many do not qualify for federal nutrition programs, so we can't say they're taken care of. So the pandemic has increased food insecurity, especially among families with children and communities of color who already faced hunger at much higher rates before the pandemic. So every community in the country, though, is home to families who face hunger. Many households that experience food insecurity do not qualify for federal nutrition programs and visit their local food banks and other food programs for extra support, and would welcome help from anyone. So is any of this acceptable? Jesus himself did not even find it acceptable to send 4,000 men plus women and children home after 3 days of being healed and spiritually fed as they listened to him. You remember that? He was afraid that they would collapse on the way home. His disciples didn't see how they could feed them. And, was this their problem? Well, the miraculous multiplication of what little the disciples had at hand was not symbolic. It was practical. They actually needed to be fed, and Jesus multiplied the food that they had to make sure that they were fed. Has God somehow forgotten how to multiply? That's the question. If we refuse to feed someone because we think we will run out of food for ourselves, or we will become insecure in some way, we are forgetting who makes the rules in this universe. God created nature and the laws of nature. He can break those laws or suspend them anytime he wants to. So world hunger is even worse than hunger in America. More people, of course, are at risk of starving now. The war in Ukraine has made it much worse, because what a lot of people don't realize is that Ukraine was considered the breadbasket of Europe. And Russia is also a big producer of wheat. And obviously there are issues regarding them getting food to people who need it. Together they export 29% of the world's wheat. Now, we export a whole lot, but they export 29%. And so in 2021, Ukraine was among the top 3 global exporters of wheat, corn, rapeseed that's used to make canola oil, sunflower seeds, sunflower oil. And so increased stress on food systems could lead to 323 million people facing acute hunger in 2022. 2022 is almost over. So out of 55 countries with food crises, 36 of those countries depend on Ukrainian and Russian exports for more than 10% of their wheat imports. Another fact, more children will suffer life-threatening forms of malnutrition. Children in America face food insecurity, really not meaning they're likely to die from starvation, but meaning that they may not have a meal every time they sit down for a meal. But more than 48 million people are facing emergency levels of hunger. And over 45 million people are affected by what's called wasting. The most visible, severe, and potentially life-threatening form of malnutrition is what they call wasting. Their body is basically wasting its own self in order to maintain itself. So globally, 1 in 5 deaths among children under 5 is attributed to severe wasting, also known as severe acute malnutrition. So more than 1 million children die each year from severe wasting. So don't ask me why he allows people, God that is, especially children, to go hungry and even starve to death. Don't ask me why he allows incompetent and corrupt people to oversee the welfare of poor families and children. You know, the truth is there's plenty of money and plenty of food in this world to feed every human being at any given moment. Plenty of them. They only starve because of incompetence, inefficiency, and corruption. But that doesn't excuse you and me from feeding someone who is hungry or helping to feed thousands who are hungry. We are not responsible to solve all of the world's political issues, but it is our responsibility to try to make sure that we give, maybe through organizations and people that we trust, to get food into the mouths of those who might go hungry. So we can't end all hunger, but we can end some hunger. Jesus could have ended all hunger. Did you ever think about that? But he only ended the hunger of some people who encountered him and were actually most interested in healing from illnesses and direct attacks by the enemy's demons and spiritual food. They weren't as concerned at that moment in time about food. But after he healed them and freed them from those demons, they listened to him for 3 more days. It does not even appear that they asked him to give them food. But he saw their physical need and he felt compassion. It was not their greatest need ultimately, but it became an urgent need. And that's why we should give to Ukraine. We do have a plate back there. because they're going through really hard times now. They're into the winter now. Because not only are they not feeding the rest of the world, they're obviously having a hard time feeding each other. So we should give to causes like that we know of, other severe long-term needs, even temporary needs in America after natural disasters. Sometimes even people who are normally well-fed lose their homes and lose the ability to communicate, and they just need some food immediately. Well, Matthew chose to tell us about Jesus' blessings for those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. And Jesus promised spiritual fulfillment, but there were millions of people in the Roman Empire who were barely surviving, and Theophilus and other followers of Jesus needed to hear Jesus' words that reminded them and us that God does care about hunger pains and malnutrition and distended bellies and utter starvation. God does want them to be able to enjoy good food and to stretch out and feel the after effects of a nice full belly. You know, it's not about gluttony. He doesn't want that for us or anybody else. It's about enjoying God's blessings and eating with gratitude in our hearts. A baby falls asleep while nursing, and there's nothing that is a clearer picture of peace and security, is there? That's what God wants for all of his children of all ages. So that brings up the question in response to the woe. Woe to you who are well fed now, for you will go hungry. Are any of us not well fed? So what is so bad about being well fed? Well, this is about gluttony, but more than that, about self-indulgence. When we are happy to feed ourselves and feel nothing, no guilt, no compulsion to help others. God wants us to be well-fed and satisfied, but do you remember what was going on in the church in Corinth? The Lord's Supper was celebrated with a meal. That was typical. That was what they normally did. That wasn't a problem. But when Jesus told his followers to eat the bread and drink the cup in remembrance of him, it was during a meal that he and his disciples shared together. And it wasn't a potluck, it was a prepared feast with certain items that were symbolic of having been set free from slavery in Egypt. But in the city of Corinth, many years later, there were some members of the church there who were pretty well off, and they ate pretty well. And there were others who had little to eat, and sometimes even nothing to eat. Well, those who had plenty should never have allowed that to be the case on any day of the week at any meal, that there would be brothers or sisters or anyone that they knew of who had nothing to eat. And yet when they came together to remember Jesus' sacrifice by eating bread and drinking wine, those who had plenty were bringing a full picnic lunch and eating and drinking as much as they wanted in front of the poor who had nothing but maybe a little piece of bread or a sip of wine mixed with 3 parts water. That was typically the best that the poor could get. And look at what Paul says to them. So then when you come together, it is not the Lord's Supper you eat. For when you are eating, some of you go ahead with your own private suppers. As a result, one person remains hungry and another gets drunk. Don't you have homes to eat and drink in? Or do you despise the church of God by humiliating those who have nothing? What shall I say to you? Shall I praise you? Certainly not in this matter. Whoever eats the bread or drinks the cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner will be guilty of sinning against the body and blood of the Lord. Those who eat and drink without discerning the body of Christ eat and drink judgment on themselves. Now, one way to interpret this, what Paul is saying here, when he says that we should be discerning the body of Christ, is that since we are the body of Christ, we can fail to view or discern every other member of his body as Christ's body. Those who are rich were not even recognizing that those who were poor were a part of Christ's body just as much as they were. You see what I'm suggesting? If you don't quite go along with that, well, how about this? If we fail to feed someone, Jesus said back in Matthew 25 at the judgment scene that we fail to feed him. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, he will say to those on his left, "Depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me." They also will answer, "Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or needing clothes or sick or in prison and did not help you?" He will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me." Then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. So, if we allow the body or even one of the least of God's children to suffer, when we can feed them, we have the ability, we are allowing Jesus' body to suffer. I think that's what Paul is saying in Corinthians. This is not a spiritual exercise. Jesus is talking about what we can do for anyone, as I see it. Who would be eliminated when he uses the term, "the least of these"? You think there's any human being that isn't encompassed in that term, the least of these? So yes, our first responsibility is to our own physical families, and equally to our church family, and the broader family that is the church around the world, but this has to include, the least of these has to include every person who is a part of the human family. Having only a few loaves and fish, or the equivalent of that, does not create a limit to get us off the hook. Because we have access to God's unlimited provisions, just like Jesus did. I have to admit that I have a hard time with this when I encounter people on the streets. There have been times in my adult life when I truly did not know how we would pay the rent from one month to the next. But we never went without a meal. You know, sometimes we would scrape together the change so that Brenda and I could go and share a meal at a restaurant, even during that time when we didn't know whether we were going to be able to pay the rent. Now we have no fear of running out of money before the mortgage payment comes out of our own bank account automatically. We don't even have to worry about the money not being there. Otherwise we wouldn't have it come out automatically. But I still don't really want to be passing out 5s or 10s or 20s or even 1s to people that I don't know. I just don't feel it. We checked into our motel when we were on our trip, and then we took a walk with the dog to go find something to eat. Well, we were at an outdoor taco stand, and as we were getting close to the taco stand, there was a guy in a wheelchair with no legs. And I kind of pretended not to see him as I went up to order our food. Well, Brenda didn't do that. She talked to him, and Charlie talked to him. And so I asked him if he wanted a taco, and he said, "I'd be okay." And then he asked for a Coke too. Well, I wasn't even ordering Cokes for us, so I felt like I was giving him more than us. So I went ahead and got him a Coke, but maybe that sounds like I did the right thing. But when he started asking about where we were staying, I was afraid he'd ask me to get him a room. And so I answered him, but then I kind of avoided his curiosity, and we walked away at a little faster pace. You ever done that? Sometimes I sincerely feel that I might do more harm than good by giving money to beggars on the street. And even Blair doesn't recommend that, because so many of them do spend it on things that are harmful to themselves. But this guy had no legs. You couldn't say, he has the ability to go and take care of himself. Now, I can come up with a list of reasons that I wasn't the one to help a guy as I was spending only one night in a city, but I just barely did the minimum. That was my choice. Maybe he wasn't even going to ask for anything else. I don't know. But I didn't want to know. So maybe we should get serious about what God had said through the prophet Malachi. I said Habakkuk in class, but it was Malachi. When the Israelites were allowing widows and orphans and foreigners to be mistreated. And they had quit tithing the 10% that the law of Moses required to be given to support the priests and Levites and who served in the temple. And you need to listen to these words carefully. There were many times that God's patience was tested in a very dangerous way. Sometimes he was patient when his patience was tested, but sometimes people paid a big price. But through his prophet Malachi, God tells him to test him. Will a mere mortal rob God? Yet you rob me. But you ask, how are we robbing you? In tithes and offerings. You are under a curse, your whole nation, because you are robbing me. Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse. Why? So that the church can build a bigger building, or they can pay the preacher more? No, that there may be food in my house. Food. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be room enough to store it. Maybe you haven't noticed, but I don't go out of my way to preach about giving. I have some good reasons to avoid criticism from outsiders and even young Christians who might think that preachers and churches are really after their money. I think it's really bad to do it on TV, in my opinion. But I preach mostly through the books of the Bible, right? And so when I come to something about giving, I try not to weasel out of it, And I'm less likely to miss something that I may not have thought of, when I preach through books. So that's one of the many advantages of my approach to the task of preaching, because I have to preach things that I'd rather not talk about, like this thing. So here's the hard question. Do I want to be blessed? I shouldn't be doing anything just to get more. I've got a lot more than most people in the world. And so maybe that's my excuse. I shouldn't be begging for more. Why do I need more blessings? I don't need to test God because I'm thankful and content with the blessings I have. Right. That's a really good excuse. The problem with that idea is that having compassion and sharing with those who are hungry is not about me. It's about them. It's about Jesus, he said. Sometimes I amaze myself. I'm amazed at my ability to make and present excellent motivational lessons that are presented to hundreds of thousands of kids in schools across the country. Well, making them is not the amazing part. The amazing part is that I make them and present them, and still I can walk away from someone or avoid someone who is hungry without feeding them after I watch these things over and over and over again. I've shown you some examples before. Here's one of those stories I found. I don't think I've shown you this one. And I've included it in my programs at schools. And I've watched this one many, many times as I presented it at many schools.
One day when I drove home from a Little League game, I saw a homeless man with a cardboard sign that said, "Need a meal." So I told my mom I wanted to do something.
Will Lorsey is a 9-year-old child. I hesitate to call him child. I think he's in a category of his own. As a 7-year-old, he decided he was going to take on this issue of hunger.
Welcome to Frogs. My group is called Frogs, and it means friends reaching our goals. And our motto is, having fun while helping others. I want you to write what we could do for a spring project.
Will's big personality does not come from me.
Fire me up, pepper me.
I think every time you meet Will, you look at him and you say, are you kidding me? But together with his buddies, they have raised over $20,000, or the equivalent of 100,000 meals, for Tarrant Area Food Bank.
How about some French baguettes? Naan from India. And these peaches are a delight.
When you see somebody who gets so engaged and gets so much of the community engaged, it's an endorsement of the battle we fight to end hunger.
Thank you for your time, and remember, no matter how tall or small you are, you can make a big difference.
So I watched that, and several other programs, almost all of my elementary school programs, even most of the high school programs, have similar stories in it. Different kids, because we have to have programs in the same schools over the years. And kids just naturally still have compassion. Sometimes when we get older, we get a little more callous, right? So here are some things to take home. First one is stop complaining about food. Stop complaining about the food that you do get. You know, there's some people, you go to a restaurant and all they can do is complain about what's wrong with the food. You're sitting at a restaurant eating food that somebody else prepared and brought to you, and they're going to have to wash the dishes, and because it's a little bit dry or it doesn't taste exactly like you expected, you got to talk about it. You got to be a food critic. Okay, let's stop that. You know, let's be thankful when we have food, no matter what it might taste like. Okay, and let's look for opportunities to feed someone. It can be group things, but when you see someone who you can guess really is hungry, and that's really what they're asking for, the best thing is to give them food. You know, maybe to carry something with you, you know, that anyone would eat, and hand it out as food rather than money that could be used in not so great ways for them. But I think even more than that, look for opportunities to give to organizations that are feeding people on a constant basis who are truly in danger of utter starvation. And there are many of them, but try to give it to ones that you can really trust. So the best organizations are through churches. And Churches of Christ, you know, not to toot our own horn so much, we don't necessarily do enough, but what we do is usually very well managed. You know, over 90% almost of any organization that we do, if not 100%, goes directly to the needs. So you can look for organizations that are connected with Churches of Christ, but it's about hunger and food. So don't feel like, well, if it's somebody else gets the glory, you know, that's not something that we should do. You know, if you have the opportunity and the ability, then find it and do it, okay? And then finally, give generously to the church. But just remember that the reason that the tithes and offerings being withheld was a problem was because the storehouses of food in the temple were not being filled. Well, guess what that food was being used for? Yes, it was being used for the priests and the Levites and the feasts, maybe, but it was also, I think, probably primarily to feed those who were hungry at times when they were not able to fend for themselves. So let's pray together. Our Father, we are so thankful for the wonderful blessings that we have in Christ, and we are also very thankful for the wonderful blessings that we have in this country where a wonderful Thanksgiving meal was celebrated by natives who welcomed strangers in, and by people who came here because they wanted to worship you in the ways that they felt their consciences led them to do so, and yet they suffered deaths and almost near starvation at times, but they chose to have a Thanksgiving meal to celebrate what they did have and to honor you and to thank you for all the blessings that they have. Father, as we enter this time that we're approaching what we call Thanksgiving, let's make it our goals to not just give thanks at one time of the year, but to give thanks at every meal and in every way for everything that you provide for us far beyond our basic needs. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. We are going to have a very special thing happen now. Sierra Johnson is going to be baptized, and if anyone else wants to be baptized, you're always welcome to do that. But we're going to have Sierra go ahead and come up as we stand and we sing our final song, or well, maybe not our final song because we may have a couple more. But let's stand together and let's sing and celebrate God's wonderful provision for us.